Thank you very much for having me. It's great to be on here. I was a mathematical and computational science major at Stanford. I've always had an interest in applied math and data. And I started what became my first startup company while I was an undergrad at Stanford. It was a sports statistics and prediction site called Team Rankings. And I started it just as a hobby, as a way of ranking Stanford's basketball team, which was very good at the time, and other basketball and football teams. It wound up turning into a small side business for me. I would charge people for subscriptions to get better access to good data and help them make picks. And then a friend of mine from Stanford, who was actually my freshman RA, ran into me one day and he said, "Hey, what are you doing with that sports site?" And I said, "Well, it's turned into a little business." And he said, "Hey, can I work on it with you?" And I said, "Sure." He worked on it with me as a side project for a little while, and then after a couple of years of that, he decided to take it over, and he's now running with it, and he's the CEO, and it's turned into a real company. So that's been pretty cool to be a part of, and then learned a lot of what I know about startups from Team Rankings, which is now a distributed company across the U.S., has a handful of employees, and is a leader in sports stats. And that continues to be a side project for me. Shortly after I graduated, I went to a small startup in Berkeley for a little while, which didn't really go anywhere. And then I went to a company called PayPal, which you've probably more likely to have heard of. PayPal was around 150 people at the time that I joined at the end of 2000. I worked on fraud detection there, did a lot of predictive modeling to try to figure out which transactions were most fraudulent, which users were most likely to be perpetrating fraud, and was a very, very technical experience, and PayPal was a really, really interesting culture, and I got to work with some really, really good people. I spent about 3.5 years there, and after it was part of eBay, it was getting to be a bigger company. I was getting a little bit of an itch to join a smaller startup. Heard about some folks who had been my former colleagues at PayPal who had started a company called LinkedIn, and I wound up initially doing some work on the side with them, and then joining full time as LinkedIn's first data guy. At LinkedIn, I led the analytics team. Started to do, whereas at PayPal, my experience was pretty much focused on one thing and one thing only, which is how do we predict fraud more effectively. At LinkedIn, it was much more here's a decent sized user base, and there's some interesting data about professionals. We're not quite sure what to do with it. Go and figure it out. And so that was a mix of trying to make the product better by understanding how people were using LinkedIn and where we could best spend some time, trying to do some predictive things, what kind of jobs you might be interested in, who are people that you may know, that sort of thing, and lots of other little areas with data. After about 2.5 years at LinkedIn, I decided I wanted to go even a little bit smaller, and I was ready to start my own company as a full-time thing. And so I started a company with a classmate of mine from Stanford, and we initially were building a Facebook app that would help people group their friends based on how they know them. It was called Circle of Friends. We saw that after some early success, we saw that moms were using our product more heavily than anybody else. We decided to shift our focus, build out a product for moms, which was kind of the natural thing for two 20-something guys without kids to do. We wound up building a pretty decent business for mothers, a place where they could find communities of other moms like them, where we created a lot of content for them. Tips on parenting, that sort of thing. Ultimately sold that company to Pop Sugar in 2012. after I left, so I left when that acquisition happened. I knew I wanted to start another company. I spent a pretty good chunk of time figuring out what exactly what company I wanted to start. I felt like with Circle of Moms, I learned a lot, and it was a very interesting experience, but I wasn't necessarily uniquely suited towards working on that problem. And so I had a very high bar in terms of what it was that I wanted to work on. And so I looked at a couple different real estate ideas and dug into them a bit. And some of them have taken off and have turned into real companies, but ultimately decided that real estate just wasn't where my heart was. I remember having one conversation with somebody who said he spent the weekend reading a manual of how you become a licensed realtor in California, and how he just found it intellectually fascinating. And I'm certainly not a snob in terms of being nerdy. I will read the nerdiest things, but that just didn't have much appeal to me at all. But meanwhile, I was spending some time with a friend of mine who's an investor who was interested in finding people who are exceptional at what they do. And I was thinking a lot about how do you map the trust that exists between people. And so what I mean by that is, I have one friend who's an engineer, and I trust his recommendations on engineers 99%. On the other hand, if he recommends an accountant to me, maybe that's better than just finding a random accountant's name online, but it's not all that. I don't trust his recommendation all that much. On the flip side, there may be somebody who's who deeply understands accounting. If he recommends an accountant to me, that carries a lot more weight. But his recommendations for engineers are not as valuable to me. And so I was interested in tackling that problem, and how do you map that trust between people, and then the process that many people take when they're trying to find an expert in a given field is they ask that person that they trust, or several people that they trust, who are the best X that you know, and they may wind up getting one or two or three names, and we want to help the product that we're now working on is called Bonafide, and we want to help people solve that problem. How do you find the top people in a given field, and how do you meet them?
So with just hearing a little bit about your trek, I mean, you have some really early experiences at some awesome places here in the Valley, PayPal, LinkedIn, and you mentioned a few others as well. A lot of that has to be seasoned into what you're doing now at Bonafide. So just for the audience of our students, could you talk a little bit about, let's go ahead and start with PayPal.
Sure.
You were there early all the way to IPO. Some of the good stuff, the hard stuff, and how what you learned is shaping what you're doing at Bonafide. Yeah,
PayPal has fostered something of a reputation as being a place where that has led to lots of entrepreneurships, and there were a lot of really smart folks at PayPal, and I think it's pretty justified. Founders of Yelp and YouTube and LinkedIn and Yammer and a handful of others were my colleagues at PayPal, and I think it was a very hard driving culture, and it was a very entrepreneurial culture in the sense that people were all solving problems that were a major threat to the business. And PayPal had probably about 20 or 30 different things that could have killed the business. It was not. We were acquired by eBay, and I think eBay had a couple of fundamental insights, and once they got those insights right, there weren't as many existential threats. PayPal had fraud and regulatory issues, and challenges with eBay, and a number of other things. And so people within PayPal had to figure out how to solve those problems, and that led to a hard charging culture, but it also led to a very innovative culture. I think that inspired a generation of entrepreneurs who did well at PayPal, but didn't go off and retire billionaires because they weren't billionaires. Maybe they made enough money to put down a down payment on their house, but they they were still hungry and went off and started companies, and they were very ambitious about it. And for me, that created a model of what it is that that I could do, and seeing my peers start excellent companies has been valuable for me to see what are some of the things that they did well, and also hear people that I think of as being peers who have built very successful companies, and there's a sense of, okay, well, they can do that, I can do that too. And so that's been was a positive experience at the time, and it's also been a positive experience moving forward.
Yeah, and then just doing a little research on you, I saw you did some work also at 500 Startups. Mm-hmm. Just curious about what you learned there, and maybe the impact you made there too.
Sure. Yeah. So I started working at 500 Startups after selling Circle of Moms, and I spent about 6 months on the staff there. They were looking to get a distribution program off the ground, and so what that means is a lot of startup success is determined by whether or not the startup can get users and can keep users engaged. I'd spent a lot of time thinking about and working on those problems at LinkedIn and then at Circle of Moms. And so I spent some time working with founders, several founders at a time, in depth. And so we had a couple of 2-month programs where I would work with 2 founders at a time for 2 months, and really dive deep into their problems. And then working a little bit more loosely with several dozen other companies, and digging into their metrics a bit and figuring out, okay, what should you be spending time on? Where do your metrics look strong? Where do they look weak? What are the kinds of things that you're not currently tracking that you might want to be tracking? That sort of thing. And I was kind of the guinea pig, the first guy who was doing that for 500 Startups. And what they were trying to do is figure out where it is that they can be the most helpful to their companies. And they now have, I think, 5 or 6 people who are playing that sort of role, who are helping companies with specific areas of distribution. And what it turns out is that there's certain aspects of distribution where it's relatively straightforward to create a formula and say and then teach people the formula. And I think that that's where they've had the most success is, if there are 3 or 4 distribution areas where it's where that are very teachable. They can have distribution leaders who are helping the founders with that. There's certain other areas where it's a little bit more murky, and it probably needs to be the founders themselves who are figuring things out from the ground floor.
All right, and now kind of pointing a little more at Bonafide, I saw an article you wrote a little while ago on why developers aren't interested in your startup.
Yeah.
We brought you on here today because we know people are going to be interested in your startup, but can you tell students why they should be interested, and maybe also what might they learn if they came aboard?
Sure. So we're trying to solve a very deep and difficult problem, which is how do you understand people's skills and the relationships between people, and then use that to tell you who it is that you can meet and should meet to be more successful in your career. And so that might be around hiring, it might be around sales or business development, or it might be around finding consultants or finding clients for your consulting companies. But we believe in the power of data and of relationships to really map the world professionally. And these are pretty difficult problems from a development perspective. We're incorporating a wide range of data sources. We're doing a lot of natural language processing and trying to gain insight from text. We're looking at networks and the interconnectedness between people, and so there are a lot of tricky data problems, and there are also a lot of user experience challenges. The kinds of things that we're doing require a fair bit of trust from our users, and that means that that means that we need people who can do a range of different things, who are very talented, as many Stanford students are, and I think that there are a lot of startups out there that are saying, well, we're Uber for such and such. That's not really what we are. We're trying to do something that is fairly distinctive, fairly different. And so for a really ambitious engineer or data scientist or designer who's coming out of Stanford, I think that can be an interesting problem to dig into. We also believe in the in people learning a lot as they're working. And my co-founder Brian, who's the CTO of Bonafide, is outstanding as a mentor, and I see him really enjoy the process of bringing younger, less experienced engineers under his wing, and teaching them the right way to do things, and really balancing what's kind of the best way to do things from an engineering perspective, but also what is the right way to think about it from a business perspective, and how can you balance doing things the perfect way technically with a quick and dirty way, and finding that right middle ground. And I've seen him help lots of engineers. We work together at Circle of Moms, and wanted to work together again, and that's something that I think is incredibly valuable for an engineer, no matter where you wind up, is working with somebody who's gonna help you learn as quickly as possible.
Yeah, that was my next question, is how you and your co-founder met. Just answered that. So my next one would actually be, meaningful, not just connections, but meaningful connections. Seems like what you're after. What's kind of the personal story behind that? Why does that mean so much to you? Yeah,
it's a good question. When I look back at my career, a lot of the opportunities that I've had have been the result of introductions that other people have made to me. And so, I started working at PayPal because my cousin's wife was working there, and I heard about it at a family brunch, and she wound up introducing me to Max, as the CTO at PayPal, and I went in and interviewed and ultimately got a job and joined there, and that was totally happenstance. The lead investor for Circle of Moms, I met through a friend of mine who, and we were having a phone call about something totally different. And I mentioned that we were raising money, and he offered to introduce me to Mike Maples, who wound up leading our investment. And I think anybody, not just in Silicon Valley, but in pretty much anywhere in the business world, has a series of those that they can point to and say, well, that was key to my career. But the way that people actually get those introductions tends to be pretty happenstance. And there are a lot of situations where if I knew what it is that you're looking for, if you think about it from the perspective of a student that is looking for a job, if there are probably a handful of people that think really highly of them, and if those people knew and could broadcast, okay, here's this student that I know, here are the skills that they have, I want to sort of push them out to others that I know who I would be happy to see them working for. that would wind up making both sides happier and more successful. And that's the kind of problem that we want to solve, is of interconnections, and where there exists that trust, how do you spread it more efficiently?
So in that kind of connections 2.0, I'm sure it's going to take a lot of engineering horsepower to get it there. So let's get to it. What are you hiring for? Undergrad, master's, intern, full-time, and also what kind of projects might our students be working on if they were to be there?
Sure. So we are hiring undergrads, masters, PhDs, engineers, data scientists, designers. One of the things that I have a real fondness for as an early stage startup founder is hiring people who want to contribute in a variety of different ways. I think in a larger company, you're more likely to join a company with a role where that is very, very clearly defined, and you are going to be responsible for these two things, and the company needs somebody who is excellent at exactly those two things. In a startup, you often work on 6 or 8 or 10 different things, and you don't necessarily know what they are in advance. And so I'm not going to say we need somebody who is an expert at these 6 things. It's more like we want people on our team who are good in a bunch of different areas, who have a variety of skills, and can maybe that's they're spending 80% of their time writing code, but they're happy to work in different areas of the code, and they may also be happy to write copy, or to hang out at Stanford career fairs, or be involved in a bunch of different ways. And so we're hiring both interns and full-time people that fit into those descriptions, and are excited to get their hands dirty.
And if I want to be an intern or one of those full-timers that comes on board, what should I be doing to make sure I pop for you as you're kind of sifting through resumes, which I know you guys get a lot of applications already?
I think probably the biggest thing for us, to stand out, is interesting, valuable projects that someone has worked on, and class projects are certainly great. But if you've done something independently, whether it's in the context of a job or elsewhere, and really take an initiative to build something that's outstanding, that's really valuable for us. And we want to hire people who are entrepreneurial, who have that drive, who potentially people who want to go off in 5 years and start their own company.
And for students that want to get in touch with you all this week, you guys are going to be on campus?
We are going to be on campus. Yeah, we're excited to be at the career fair on Thursday.
Awesome. I know you'll be at the career fair on Thursday. You'll also be at the startup fair coming down the pipe as well. But most immediately, career fair on Thursday. And then I know you guys are doing resume reviews tomorrow, Tuesday, and I believe Wednesday as well here at Beam.
Yep.
So students should tune in. All right. But how about beyond this week? So if students are watching this and those events have passed, what's the best way to get on the radar?
Send us an email, jobs@bonafide.co. We're always happy to hear from talented students.
All right. And then kind of winding down to the last couple of questions here.
Yeah.
A lot of our Stanford students have that fork in the road of, big company versus a startup right off the bat. How might you advise someone in making a good decision there?
I think that I obviously have a bias towards one, but I think that big companies are better for some people, and startups are better for some people. To me, the biggest distinction is kind of the level of ambiguity that you like and are comfortable with. I think that people who want more clarity, who want to know the company is going to be doing exactly this in 6, 12, 24 months. A bigger company is probably a better way to go. If you are if you thrive on and are excited about the opportunity to define what a company is and take something that's more of a blank slate and turn it into something that a startup is to me a more interesting opportunity. But obviously there are lots of great roles in both startups and big companies.
All right, and to close it down here, my last question for you is kind of that real let's get around the fire kind of question. What did you do at Stanford that is really helping you out big time today as you think back to your years here on the farm? And then also fast forward for current students that have that opportunity now, what advice might you have for them? But let's start with you. What helped you out big time?
Yeah, I didn't mention this when you asked me to talk about my experience, but in some ways my first startup was the squash team at Stanford. A friend of mine who's also now a Silicon Valley entrepreneur started. There was no squash team when I was in school. He started the team my junior year. I wound up joining it and becoming very involved. And in my senior year, I took it over, and I was the captain / president of the team. And that really got me excited about starting new things and also seeing what entrepreneurship can be and the impact that you can have. Having had the opportunity to do that at Stanford was phenomenal. I don't think that I saw myself as a future entrepreneur when I started out at Stanford. So that would be one piece, and then the second piece would be just the people that I met at Stanford have been incredible group and extremely valuable in both my personal life and my career. I'm married to somebody who's in my freshman dorm. I've started 2 companies with people that I went to Stanford with, and a number of others I rely on for advice and feedback, and worked with in various capacities. So I feel like I'm in a lot of ways Stanford is still very much a part of my life, of my day to day. I'm lucky to have gone there.
And what would be your advice now for students that have this opportunity in front of them?
For students who are getting started in their post Stanford life, I think probably the biggest piece of advice I would give is to try to be honest with yourself and figure out what it is that you're good at and what it is that you really enjoy, and that may be a little bit hard for somebody who has not been in the working world, who's mostly been taking classes. But I feel like one thing that college students in general sometimes tell interviewers what the interviewers probably want to hear, and don't necessarily say, well, this is actually what I like. They say, oh, well, I love. What I really want to do is, and then fill in the blank of what this company is doing. I think it's a better strategy to say, well, I really like to do X. I really don't like to do Y, and just be a little bit more honest and transparent about it, especially with yourself. And that's gonna put you in a position where you're more likely to succeed. And then secondarily, work with people who are both great at what they do and who are great people and are ethical and treat one another well. And that's gonna give you the best opportunity to learn a lot. And if you're learning a lot, then it makes up for a lot of other things.
Great people, great connections. That sounds like what you guys are all about at Bonafide too.
Yeah.
So, hey, great way to close out, Mike. Thank you for making the time today. And we're hoping students come by and visit you guys this week on the farm. Thanks again.
Yeah, we're looking forward to meeting you. Thank you.